And welcome back inside the High School T press box. Today's our 704 football preview. We have Richard Walker with us, and Richard Walker is new to us. He's going to be helping us out this year with his writing. He's going to be going to games for us down in the 704 Charlotte area. He's been doing this for a long time, really experienced writer. He's experienced on radio as well. Richard, kind of introduce yourself to our audience here and just tell us about how excited you are for the season.
Well, my name is Richard Walker. I grew up in Bowling Springs, North Carolina, mostly a child of Gardner Webb, but went to a bunch of Crest, Shelby, Chase, Kings Mountain, that area, old classic Western North Carolina Activities Association, Southwestern Conference games. Had some relatives on my dad's side that went to old Hudson High, old Lenore High, and the old Western WNCHSA days. So I grew up going to a bunch of games as a kid to watch friends, family, and others played, but got into keeping stats through Gardner Webb and of course, was quickly drawn to high school sports and kept stats for Crest High School and started school records for them. I guess it would have been about the 12th year of that school. Moved to Raleigh, graduated high school at Sanderson High School in 1982, and started working part-time at the News Observer and had a blast covering Eastern North Carolina football. And since then, I became a full-time writer after graduating from NC State in 1987 at the Hickory Daily Record, the Durham Morning Herald, the Charlotte Observer's Gastonia Bureau, the Gaston Gazette, and I've been, running my own CarolinaSportsHub.com website since 2020 when COVID hit, and went back to doing some stuff for the Charlotte Observer the last couple of years, and I've just been, I've been to more than 1,000 high school football games and have just delighted in watching all those games and state championships and season openers. There's always kind of I feel there's an electricity in every town that you go to, particularly the closer you get to a high school football stadium on the traditional Friday night. And obviously some nights it's Thursday or Saturday, depending on when the games are, but it's just always been a lifelong passion. I'm 62 years old and I've been going to games since I was 6. So I've always had a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, I'm feeling that energy too. We're finally in game week here, and you can just kind of you feel it in your blood. It's finally happening. High school football's happening. Before we move on to the content here, where can people find your website? And then also, if you have social media, let them know where to follow you as well.
On X, it's jrwalk22, and my website is www.carolinasportshub.com. Carolinas, plural, sportshub.com.
Awesome, man. Well, we appreciate you being here and appreciate you helping us out this year. It's going to be a fun year. So we're going to start with the bigger conferences in Charlotte. I think probably the best one to start with would be the MEC Power 6, 7A, 8A. So there's some changes in this conference this year, Mr. Walker. So we have West Charlotte, Independence, kind of changing coaches here. Mallard Creek is still in the mix as well. Butler has a new coach, and Donald Littlejohn comes back to Butler this year. Chambers under Captain Marlin again this year. I expect them to have a big improvement. And the North MEC was also in this conference, finished 3-7 last year. So big picture takeaway. What do you think is going on here? Do you think this is still a West Charlotte leading spot, even with the change at head coach? What's your impressions of the league this year with all the changes happening?
It's going to be fascinating because obviously when this league got together, 5 of the 6 schools had won state titles.
Yep.
So hence the name. And there was an expectation by a lot of them. I mean, it's really amazing how after year 1 of the actual conference that we have so much transition with 3 new coaches. One coach leaving Independence, his alma mater, DJ McFadden, comes to West Charlotte. You mentioned Donald Littlejohn, Robert Williams, another former West Charlotte guy, replaces Littlejohn at Independence. So there's a lot of change there. And then another big switch is apparently Jamari Nichols, who had been West Charlotte's, fearless quarterback, is now playing for Captain Munderland at Chambers. So I'm really curious to see how this league shakes out. Obviously, there's a lot of numbers being talked about the number of transfers coming in, coming out at all these schools. I'm going to take it on faith based on what I've seen out of DJ McFadden in 4 years that he'll have a decent team at West Charlotte. But I think he's got a lot to work with. I mean, he's got a lot to establish, I guess, what he does vis-a-vis what was going on previously with Sam Griner. And obviously Griner was a fantastic coach. So I'm interested to see how that shakes out with them. Mallard Creek, I think, feels like they've been ignored. They've got a really daunting schedule this year. To be curious to see how they do. Kennedy Tinsley is now far and away the dean of coaches in that league with 7 years experience. This is a lot, given how talented this league has historically been. Butler has gone through a little bit of changes. Brian Hales came back, and then now he's left and turning it over to Littlejohn. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. I think it's an intriguing league, and the fascinating thing about really each of the Charlotte leagues, since there's 6 teams apiece, it's almost you get a true non-conference segment of your schedule, and then a true conference schedule of your segment of your schedule. So it's going to be a part A and part B of a season, unlike a lot of the old school 10-team conferences where, boy, you play one non-conference game and then jump right into the fire week 2 or week 3, depending on how your schedule played out. This league gives teams a chance to kind of trial and error and figure out what they have or don't have, as the case may be.
I can't think of the last time that we've had a conference where there's been so many exchanged pieces, whether it's coaches and players, just going back and forth between the different teams. It's so fascinating. And you're right, the team that's kind of under the radar almost, which sounds crazy because it's Mallard Creek. And of course, Mallard Creek has all the history behind it. They just kind of been sitting there waiting in the wings while all this stuff is happening around them. They don't really talk too much. They kind of do their thing. They have a really good rising junior class, Richard, between the couple of sophomore running backs they had last year and the quarterback last year. The one that was most successful was also the sophomore, Kalen Napier. Are you thinking that Mallard Creek might have the best shot at taking this title from West Charlotte, or is it someone else?
You would have to think that, but Independence had built itself up to be a pretty stout program, and it's hard to fathom that that Robert Williams does a whole lot different over there. So I'm kind of curious to see, and there's also I think there's an expectation, and I think as the year wears on and we start seeing the actual rosters, we'll see how many Independence guys, if any, followed McFadden to West Charlotte. So that'll be an interesting storyline moving forward. And, Mallard Creek, what's always fascinating to me about this league, and this is the second year of it in this current configuration, but the extraordinary rivalries historically that West Charlotte and North Mac have, maybe bigger in basketball than football, but it's still a great rivalry. Mallard Creek and basically everybody, Independence and Butler, West Charlotte and Independence. I mean, you're talking games that in the old days of Charlotte football, when everybody had like a game of the week at Memorial Stadium, you're talking this league is filled with 3 or 4 of those rivalries that were like the Friday night game of the week at Memorial Stadium. And, the younger kids may not have an understanding or an appreciation for what that was like back in the day, but, for a time, there was no bigger game in Charlotte than West Charlotte Independence. And, last year was a big game, but West Charlotte kind of mashed everybody. And as you pointed out, Mallard Creek had a great young nucleus a year ago. Kennedy Tinsley's worked those guys well. They, if it's even possible for them, appear to be flying under the radar. So I think you got a valid point that maybe Mallard Creek's a team that collectively is getting slept on.
For me, the other team that's the most fascinating to me is Chambers, between Jamore Nichols transferring over there from West Charlotte. This team, even without that happening, they were bringing back a lot of talent from last year. And remember, last year they had kind of a shaky regular season, but in the playoffs, they go to Pinecrest and beat Pinecrest in Moore County on the road in the first round. That told me that this team is closer to arriving than people might have thought during the season last year. They bring back so much talent on defense. They have a really good defensive back named Marley Vincent. There's a lot of pieces here at Chambers, and I'm so fascinated to see what this record becomes, because I can tell you they're not going to only have 5 wins this year. It's going to be more than that. I'm just not sure just how many.
Well, the thing with them is they play a real challenging schedule, and I do think that Nickel. I will say this: it's been fascinating because I've watched particularly the Keep Pounding Classic last year. Nobody's going to dispute the talent that Faison Brandon has. But if you walked away from that game, you went, boy, that guy for West Charlotte left it all on the field. And I expect to see more of the same from Nichols at Chambers with Captain Munderland coaching him. So that's a real fascinating dynamic, because how does he assimilate and plug in what they already have? And, let's be honest. I mean, West Charlotte, Independence, Mallard Creek, Butler, and Chambers all play such a daunting non-conference schedule. How healthy are they when they start conference play?
That's a good point.
And if not, how do they navigate that?
That's a good point.
So
Yeah,
I
so
think
much
that'll
emphasis.
tell a lot about how all those teams are doing.
Yeah, the injury thing is it's so
Yes,
much this is unknown, and
because they're playing in-state and out-of-state powers in this league,
yeah,
non-conference games.
and you got to respect how they're not afraid
Yeah,
of anybody. All these teams play people
correct.
from in-state, out-of-state, and I think we see that when it comes to playoff time. I think one of the reasons why the West continuously dominates the state championship games is I think they're just more tested throughout the year than the
Sure.
teams that often come out of the East. So a very good point by you. All right, so before we move on here, just shot in the dark. Who's your conference champion?
I think you're right. I think Miller Creek. If I had to pick somebody right
That's
now, I
my
would go
pick
with
as
them
well.
just because of
Yeah.
the volume of returnees.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going with Mallard Creek as well. Really like their offensive line. It seems like things have been kind of building for a while there, and I think this is a chance to be maybe their best team under Kennedy Tinsley there, and he's had some pretty
Yes.
good. So
And they've
really,
had some good ones,
yeah,
but
it's
they've
really
just been overshadowed in their own league a couple of times.
yeah. I think this year's their opportunity for sure. Well, let's go to the other kind of one of the other conferences here. We'll do the Kershaw 7A. Obviously, defending 8A state champion Huff is in this conference. They finished 14-0 last year, 5-0 in conference play. They only have 16 points in conference play last year. Unbelievable. Just considering some of the teams they play. We all know that they lost some guys, but they also got some guys in the offseason,
Right.
including a 3-star corner, the 4-star safety Davion Jones from West Charlotte. There's so many players in that defense. Just about every guy is going to be a college player that's starting there. Is there any chance in the world that you see Huff not winning this conference this year?
It would take catastrophic injuries for that not to happen. Because, I think they're well coached. They do their system well. Their defensive strategies. Think about how many teams you and I have seen the last couple of years that you go, they're a pretty good team. And Huff not only beats them, they just suffocate their offense to the point that they can't even get a first down at times. And it's unlike a lot of things I've seen. It's fascinating. You watch ESPN when they do their catalog of 30 for 30. They remind me of the 85 Bears sometimes defensively, which is where they just break people's will with their defense being so talented and so fast and so dominant.
Yeah, it's well, they have a great system there where they kind of come at you from all angles. They
Right.
do lots of crazy stunts and whatnot, so it keeps people off balance. So it's not just it's not just the great players. They also make it hard for you to prepare for as well. And the other thing, is the offense with Ethan Royal.
You almost forget about them. Yeah.
Yeah, with Ethan Royal coming back as a state champion quarterback,
Right.
coming back, you can only imagine how things will improve for him this year. Is there any, besides injuries, is there anything that you think might hold this team back, or do you think it's just going to be, but when it's all said and done, they're just going to kind of march to another 8A state championship?
Yeah, like I said, it's got to take injuries. And, I also say this, based on what we just said about the MAC Power Six, darn well DJ McFadden is thinking about, oh, yeah, nobody thinks we're any good anymore. And West Charlotte is likely to play with a chip on their shoulder in their 8A. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the playoffs. That West Charlotte had nothing for them last year. But, Huff has tried so hard to win the state title. Now that they're there, as you've often heard from many coaches in many other sports, including football, it's tougher to stay there than to get there. And I do think, based on the personnel they have, Huff is very well suited and equipped to stay there. But saying that and doing it in a sport like football that's so physical and emotional and challenging physically has its own set of challenges and issues, because I think Deshaun Baker will navigate that. But, I don't think you could duplicate the hunger with which that team attacked last year, because they had always been the best team that never won championship. This year, now they've got how do they repeat? Do they repeat? And I think most people feel like they can. I think they can, but will they? That's the challenge that lays ahead of them.
You're absolutely right, because even though they've been so good really since they opened in 2010,
Yes, right.
there was a chip on their shoulder because they just could never break through. And last year's team did have that chip on their shoulder, so it's going to be a little bit different being the hunted now when they're more last year.
And
So
by
that
everybody in the state now. I mean, they
yeah.
I would say last 2 years, it'd be hard for anyone in Mecklenburg to not say they were the kings of Mecklenburg County, even though they lost to Grimsley 2 years ago. But they have established that they're not only the kings of Mecklenburg County, they're the kings of the state. So they're going to get it from all sides. But as we've established, that the personnel they have gives them a chance to handle all comers. And if they stay reasonably healthy, I think they're going to be fine.
Absolutely. Well, the other team that most people think about out of this conference is Myers Park. There was a coaching change this offseason. Chris James had got an opportunity to start in the NFL, and Duke Howell comes over from Union County. Obviously, Duke Howell is the father of Sam Howell. He's an offensive guru. I really like the hire, Mr. Walker, because Duke Howell, some of his offenses that he can run, you kind of imagine some of the players that Myers Park's had in the past in terms of receivers, and you can really pick how that would look with that kind of talent is at his disposal. Were you surprised by that hire?
Yes and no. I mean, it almost harkens back to the days of Gus Purcell when Myers Park first started their program in the 50s. I mean, they've always been considered ahead of the curve as far as the passing game. I mean, yes, obviously, most of us have lived through the Tommy Knotts Independence, the air raid, or whatever you want to call it. But Gus Purcell was always considered the quarterback guru dating back to the 50s, in this area. So is more the same with that. I'm interested to see how Myers Park navigates it, because there's been a heck of a lot of expectation. And that school, and I was at the game, they had nothing for Huff last year. And do they do better with a lot of personnel, new and different personnel? They've still got talent around, but it's a challenge for them because Huff is the big dog in their conference. But would it completely surprise you if Myers Park could just get in the opposite side of the bracket, that maybe they can sneak back to get possibly a second shot at them in the playoffs next year? It wouldn't be. In fact, I would compare Myers Park, the team this year, to facing probably the same challenges that maybe West Charlotte faced a year ago, with all their personnel differences and changes and high expectations from having won. I mean, the difference was West Charlotte had won a state title, but at a lower classification. Myers Park, I think, is probably perceived as less talented than last year. But, I have no doubt that by the end of the year, when you talk about signing day, we've got about 10 to 15 kids on that team signing college scholarship somewhere. Yeah. So it's not like they're without talent, but Howell, he's a veteran coach. This is not his first rodeo. And so he has a way, I think he'll have a way of figuring out what he's got. And that's what I'm saying. The Charlotte leagues lend themselves, all leagues, including the private school leagues, because the schedule is so backloaded with conference games. You play so many non-conference games, you really get a chance to do trial and error to figure out what you've got, and more importantly, what you don't have.
Absolutely. Want to get your thoughts on the rest of the teams in this conference? So we have South Meck, Hopewell, West Meck, and Garinger. A lot of these teams have relatively new coaches that take things in the right direction. Hopewell is a team that we've heard might be making a big step up this year. Do you have any thoughts on the rest of the teams in this league?
It's going to be challenging because I think Huff is so dominant. Myers Park, whether you think they're dominant or not, is being South Meck has made some inroads, but they find that they can't really compete with those two teams, or they haven't been able to in recent years. Hopewell is a fascinating situation because you would think, based on their proximity to Huff and a lot of the same youth football kids, presumably, play on those teams, that they would be a team that would kind of get into that discussion. Garinger, Jupiter Wilson's, I applaud his efforts and what he's doing at Garinger, but boy, it's a tough road in that situation. It's been so long since they've been even relevant. West Meck's got a new coach coming in from Morrow, so he's learned a little bit about winning. So, I think there's an element of, a lot of people think that all these things can happen in a year. It really takes program building to get to the point that you are, and by that I mean you really work well with your feeder programs, particularly the junior varsity in your own school, but whatever middle schools that feed into you. And I think that's the one thing that'll be interesting to notice with all these changes in Charlotte. We may not see the full impact of the continued coaching changes until a couple of years down the road, because I think it's hard to run a program when you only get them for 4 years. And I think you need to have an outreach program. And I know it's not quite geared for that, like say in like say Cleveland County, where I grew up, you've got Crest Middle School, Crest High School, Burns Middle School, Burns High School. I mean, it's not structured that way in Charlotte, but a lot of these folks do have some semblance of an idea of who they're going to get coming to their schools, and so they have a chance to have some outreach, be it with the Pop Warner programs, the middle school feeder programs, that sort of thing. But the really good programs have a really structured, organized junior varsity program and a good feeder program. And in fact, I don't know if you've seen this, I've seen where people now do high school signing days. Like you're leaving a middle school and you're going as an eighth grader, you're going to go into workouts in the off season, heading into your ninth grade year. You've signed with the high school to see what they do and learn the workings of their program. And I think that's probably a real positive for the programs that do it that way.
It's definitely different. I'm sure it's different that schools have to do that kind of stuff nowadays.
Sure.
And I guess from when you first started doing this, I can't imagine the amount of things that are different to you since you first started doing all this.
It's fascinating how a lot of the good programs always had, in essence, a kindergarten or first grade through 12 kind of setup. Shelby most notably. Mm-hmm. But the style of play, and I will say this: the thing that, and I would think you've probably lived through this the last, I'd say probably 10 to 15 years, the explosion of 7-on-7 off-season drills has enhanced the quality of particularly quarterback play and probably receiver play secondarily. I mean, you've gotten a way to get better and more athletes on the field, and it's interesting when you get into chats with a lot of the high school basketball coaches, some of those guys feel like there's been a residual change a little bit, even as our state in North Carolina continues to grow and is very populous. Mm-hmm. I'm of the age that I went to, well, think about this. I went to Crest when David Thompson was our number one alumnus. So Crest was considered a basketball school in the 70s. That obviously has changed. And that was true around the state of many of the basketball guys. And not that we still don't have James Worthy, Dominique Wilkins, David Thompson, Buck Williams, Anton Jamison. We could go on and on about those good basketball players, Michael Jordan. But it seems like possibly because of the transfers to out-of-state basketball-only type situations, Oak Hill being one of them, IMG academies, those kind of things, it feels like football has really on the fast track of getting the better athletes in this state playing their sport. And a lot of high school basketball coaches attribute that to the Panthers coming in. And really, if you want to argue about it, the sea change that Florida State brought to the ACC. So there's two things at work that have kind of enhanced the level and quality of high school football in our state.
I think you're right on the money because, I mean, just in this rising senior basketball class, we've had a couple of 5-star players who, North Carolina just left. They go to different.
Jaleel Smith just left Hunter House to go to Oak Hill Academy.
Yeah, it's basketball. Basketball's become so different. It's unfortunate that a lot of the top talent is not staying here. But you're right. It has given a kind of an alley for football to really fill up here. So high school football is on the rise.
And it seems to me that football, while there are some academies and some superpower schools nationally, there doesn't seem to be the quote, I would call it the Oak Hill effect in that sport that you see in football, that you see in basketball or have seen in basketball.
Yeah.
I was recently a couple of years ago talking to James Worthy about it. And I was like, James, you'd have been pressured to leave Ashbrook.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think you would have stayed? And he felt like because his family was there and all that. But, I mean, he would have faced the same pressures that Jerry Stackhouse faced. I think Stackhouse wanted to stay in Kinston, still considers Kinston home, but the pressure was to go to Oak Hill for his last year in high school. And he did.
It's a different world. It's unfortunate.
Yes.
But I think they can't stay here. But when they really can, it's too bad. Well, let's move on to the Southwestern 7A, 8A. This one's fascinating to me, Richard, because the Province won this conference last year, but a late change at head coach in the offseason with Wesley Ward moving down to Georgia. Right. Do you think this kind of clears the way for Palisades to kind of jump ahead and get back into that top spot there?
A lot of people that I've talked to think so from watching Palisades offseason. And Here's one thing that I'll say, and I've always thought this guy was a really good coach. Palisades got a sneaky coaching addition that people probably don't realize. I mean, obviously, North Gaston has had their struggles, but Darrell Wilson was considered the brains in the operation at Haas, a good defensive coach at both Kings Mountain and Crest, head coach at North Gaston. He leaves head coaching job to become an assistant coach at Palisades. So he's going to be a sneaky good addition for Palisades in a league that appears to be very winnable. And much like what we're talking about the other leagues, I mean, you've got 3 first-year coaches in that conference, and you're coming off a year, and obviously the metrics didn't work for them. Only 3 of their 6 teams got to go to the playoffs last year, and only 2 won in the first round. So there's an easy chip on the shoulder that league could portray. Those guys played at Jones. They just didn't win a lot of those games last year, so all those teams were rated lower than other leagues, the other 2 Charlotte leagues. So it'd be curious to see how that manifests itself moving forward, because there's an awful lot of big talk and a lot of expectation coming from the Palisades crowd. And based on the talent and how quickly he's built that program, I have no reason to doubt that they're going to not be a good fit this year. But they've got. It'll be interesting to see how they perform, and interesting to see how Providence responds to losing a coach so late in the game. And you got a new coach at Audrey Kell, so you're looking at 2 of the top 3 teams in the league. You got new coaches.
Yeah, I will say, Audrey Kell's situation had more time to prepare than Providence.
And I believe he was a long-time assistant there anyway, correct?
Art Green, long-time assistant, Audrey Kell. So
he's familiar with it. The transition shouldn't be much for him.
Yeah. The thing you have to like about Palisades is the quarterback Cole Huff, who had transferred there from South Meck, I think, the year before or last year, and he had a pretty good season at Palisades. 65% of his passes completed, 17 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, threw for over 2,000 yards. I expect him as a senior to be a potential favorite for Conference Player of the Year here. The tight end Hudson, really good player, good blocker, a good receiver as well, one of the best tight ends in the state. So they have guys on their offense that are very noteworthy. And of course, they have Nick Rankin back in the defensive backfield. He's quite a player as well. So Palisades seems like they're kind of they've been ramping up, and maybe this is the first year where they can make a real serious deep run into the playoffs.
Yeah, and I was at the game last year, and as you might imagine, based on what you were talking about, there was an awful lot of emotion when Palisades played, quote, at South Meck, although South Meck didn't have the field, so the game was played at Old Waddell High Stadium in the first round of the playoffs because of the Huff factor. I mean, here's a guy going against his old team in the playoffs in a game that both teams felt they could win, and it was a very competitive game, and both sides could have won, but Palisades came out in the end.
And maybe it was the Huff factor. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, he played a good game in that game for sure.
Yeah, and we'll get something similar with Jamari Nichols playing West Charlotte this year, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
First, the rest of the conference, East Beck is still kind of in a place where they're rebuilding. I really like the direction of the Valentine Ridge program. Still extremely young program. I like Tyson Fernandez a lot. I think he's got a good pulse in those kids. Did you see Valentine Ridge taking a step up this year?
Well, I think this is a critical year for them because it's an opportunity. And, I think the thing with them is, like we were talking about earlier, he's a second-year coach. I think it's the fourth year of the school. So now you've got a fully, you hope, program where all the kids, the vast majority of the kids that are your seniors have been there with you the entire time. So now you have the opportunity to establish what culture you want to have in your program, what you've taught your kids, how much benefit you've gotten from probably taking a lot of lumps at both the JV and the varsity level because you're an absolute startup, but they've got great facilities, seem to have a pretty good supportive fan base. And I would say look no further than Palisades and say, well, they're young too, and they figured it out. So maybe Valentine Ridge can do the same thing. I mean, it is an interesting comparison and contrast between those two programs. And they've done it, and they've accomplished, they've obviously accomplished a lot in a very short time, in a very competitive market, and a conference that gives them an opportunity to win. But that doesn't mean you're necessarily going to do it right away.
Matt mentioned earlier in regards to Providence, one of their best players, the defensive tackle Corey Cunningham, left for Huff this offseason. So one more of that player movement we've been talking about and how it's going to affect some of the teams that, we were expecting to be pretty good. So we'll see how Providence responds to that. Any other notes on this conference before we move on?
Well, I know that Rocky River's got a new coach. They've had some good days in the past. They've had some, I think, number struggles. Lenny Sanders has been in East Meck for a while, and he's trying to do it the right way at that place. I just think it's so challenging with such a competitive market. And look at the neighborhood for some of those schools. It's really hard to keep your kids on your rosters because it ain't so much that you're fighting with the public schools, but you got the private schools nipping at your heels too. So I think it's so the worm can turn so quickly of a program that's considered a winning, positive program to one that's negative because there's so many out there in Mecklenburg County now. It's really amazing to me how quick that has changed because, I'm old enough to remember when East Meck was kind of a gold standard football program, and they've really struggled the last several years.
Yeah. There's a lot of competition in the area. And
absolutely.
That's one of the things that people that's one of the things that people kind of on the eastern side of the state wonders about Charlotte is like, why aren't they why aren't they just continually dominating us every year? Like, why is it even a competition in 8A, 7A? And to me, it's that answer of the private schools, because over here in this side of the state, we don't have Providence Days and Charlotte Christians and all these private schools. We have, there's Ravenscroft and NRCA in these schools, but they haven't really kind of taken the opportunity like the private schools of Charlotte have. So it's a lot different. I think that's why
and the thing I would say with them is they are directly tied to the Panthers, almost exclusively, even down to some of the personnel and coaches. Because if you look at who Charlotte Christian, Providence Day, Charlotte Latin, Charlotte Country Day have had playing for them, it's the children of former NFL guys or prominent athletes in the area. To the point that, the funny story that a lot was talked about, I guess, last week leading up to Luke Kuechly going in about him, and I guess it's Todd Blackledge and Greg Olson and Jonathan Stewart coaching Charlotte Christian's middle school team. Now, one of the coaches called into the local radio station going, man, if they're coaching the team, who plays for these guys? So, there's an element of the professional ranks of the Panthers, because those guys are going to live somewhere. And it's really enhanced the private school brand, possibly more than the public school brand, if you really want to be honest about it.
Yeah, it's a huge advantage for the Charlotte area, just having those Panthers connections. And it's not like the Panthers too. It's other players that, didn't even play for the Panthers. They settled in Charlotte, after their career as well. And it's become kind of a hot spot for player retirements and whatnot. It's fascinating. It's really fascinating.
It really is.
So if we had to make one pick in this conference, who are you going with?
We're talking about the Southwestern?
Yeah, Southwestern.
I'll go with Palisades to start with, just because I feel like, he's been gunning for this year for a couple of years, and I think that they've got a quarterback that they believe in, and they've got numbers. I think Simmons has got it going on there, and it'll be curious to see how far they can go in the playoffs with this bunch, because they'll be in that daunting 8A bracket, and knowing full well that the Huffs of the world and the West Charlottes of the world are lurking. So, but I'll pick them to win this conference.
Well, and speaking of the private schools we were talking about, let's touch on the NCIS South Conference here before we go over to Gadsden County and Cleveland County. So Providence Day, of course, won the conference last year, and of course they won the Division I state championship as well. They were loaded. They're so loaded. The defense this year, they tell me that every single player on the defense will be Division I player. I believe it. And I've heard they have a nice freshman class as well. So they are out, especially on defense. Question for them, I think, is going to be that quarterback spot, right? Because they had a pretty good player played multiple years, and before that was Jaden Davis. So it's been a while since there was kind of a question there, right? What's your expectations for this Providence State team?
I think, though, Chad Greer has it rolling. I was struck in my research on them. I was stunned. This is the first time they've ever been unbeaten state champion. As good as they've been. And then the other thing that struck me was every team in the league has won 8 or more state titles. Providence is the lowest at 8. Christian has 9, Country Day 13, Latin 12, and they've all won a state title in the last 10 years. I don't know that you could find a league anywhere in the country. Granted, few leagues have 4 teams, but 4 teams with that much history and that much proximity and that much back and forth between them that it's set up like that. I mean, it really is remarkable because, as you point out, not only are they just winning their own league, they are statewide relevant in their class, in their division. Because all those teams have won multiple state titles, and it's not like 2 or 3 teams have fallen off the wagon and haven't won in 20 years. I mean, the most recent team to win the longest gap has been Charlotte Latin. They last won in 2017, and I believe that was a Daniel Jones team, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
and still close to that era. Yeah,
recent,
yeah. So I mean, each one of those guys, and it's interesting. Whenever you cover basketball games or the football games, you see you look up and see the jerseys, and it's just unreal. All the different guys they've had that have come through there.
Yeah,
at these private schools.
What's interesting to me is, it felt like Charlotte Country Day was making some progress. But they lose the 5-star Breland Clark and in the 4-star corner Nate Dollard to Providence Day. So maybe some of that progress might be stifled a little bit here. Charlotte Latin's been they've been steady. They've been steady. Of course, they haven't been beating Providence Day, but they've been consistently good. Last year they started out 7-0, and then just lost the last 4 games. Charlotte Christian, of course, they have tons of talent at that school, and then in the coaching ranks as well, down the middle school part. Is there anyone here you think's got a chance to upset Providence Day, or do you think it's going to be pretty clear sailing?
Well, the only thing that could derail them, Providence Day in recent years has played a more daunting, almost progressively so each year, non-conference schedule. Should they have a spate of injuries at, say, quarterback, where they have some questions already, I could see that making it difficult for them. Because think about it, as you point out, Latin 7-0 or 6-0 and goes 0-3 in their league. I mean, we know they're a good team. That's how easy it is to go 1-3. If you're off a little bit, you can lose all those games. So that would be the only way that I think Providence Day would struggle, is if injuries hit them and alter their personnel for those last 3 games. And I'm also curious with what Christian's doing, because obviously we're talking about the high-profile middle school coaches they have. They convinced a guy to leave his alma mater and Jamie Deese at Forest Hills to come in and be their coach.
Yes.
That's big. That says an awful lot about a lot of things there, financial incentive notwithstanding. But, I'm curious to see how they do it, because I think, what is the comments that they use? They talk about the other ones, the other school down the street, because they're, literally half a mile from each other. So it'll be curious to see how that plays out at Christian. And, the buildup for that game will be enormous. And in that league, you only get, like I said, 3 shots at a league game. So you better be healthy and ready to go in those 3 games, or you can struggle. I mean, granted, you maybe can do the get back game in the playoffs, because if you're, all those teams are Division I, or they were last year. I'm assuming they will be again this year. Mm-hmm. And another thing I think is going to be interesting is when, if ever, does that league add Ambassador Christian in Huntersville in there? And there's been some chatter that may happen soon too. And they're supposed to be, and they've got a lot of good players too, but obviously you're getting in the fastest of the fast lanes of private school to join that league in the 2 sports that they've been good at, football and basketball. So to be curious to see when or if that happens.
Yeah, it's a lot of people waiting for that one to happen. I think they're currently in NCISA for wrestling, and they're just waiting for the other sports at this point. So that's going to be fascinating to watch long term. I tell you, Charlotte Christian, they had that struggle part last year where they lost to Catholic Indy, then Myers Park back to back. But they really turned it on towards the end of the year, where they crushed Country Day, they beat Latin in the first round, and then they beat Raven Gap on the road for the right to play Providence Day in the Division I championship. So Coach Deese is coming on, so a team that has momentum from last year. It's going to be fascinating to see how things develop.
Yeah, and I also thought it fascinating, given the kind of acrimony that existed with Raven Gap's departure, that Providence Day is still playing them. So, I mean, maybe they didn't feel strongly about getting them out of the NCISA. Hey, there's others did. But, I mean, who knows? I mean, obviously, when you've got 3 conference games, it's hard to schedule, particularly in the mid-year part. And I think that's when they're playing them. But I believe they're going to Raven Gap this year.
Yeah, I know Coach Greer has a ton of respect for Raven Gap, so he always speaks highly of them. So it's not surprising me he still wants to get games with them in. That'll be an interesting result to check out as well.
Yeah.
I think that covers us for the private schools, the main private schools in the area. Let's go over to kind of I guess your main coverage territory, I guess. So Gaston County, Cleveland County. A lot of people say this is like the heartbeat of high school football in the state, especially Cleveland County. So we'll start with the 5A, 6A. Really interesting league. Obviously, Ashbrook won it last year. 6A Ashbrook won it last year. Crest finished in second before going on to win the 5A state championship. You have South Point, which is a heavy hitter. You have Kings Mountain, which is a heavy hitter. And then you have Huss, Forest View, North Gaston, which have athletes, but they're just in a tough conference.
Yeah, they're really challenged in that league. The thing about Ashbrook is I was struck by this, and I've lived it, and it was interesting researching. Ashbrook's 12 wins were the most they've had since 2003.
Wow.
It was their first conference title since 2005. Wow. They hadn't beaten Crest since 2010. They've now beaten, I think, South Point 3 in a row after losing 17 in a row. So Ashbrook has really resurrected its program under Darius James, and good for him. He played there. His son British Brooks played there. He obviously has a pretty good handle on what Ashbrook can and maybe in his opinion should be. And then, they open up a Palisades this Friday night. I mean, they're stepping into the fast lane right off the bat. So Ashbrook is an interesting team to look at. I know that they've got a bunch of talented kids. They've had a couple of guys move in from other places to augment their roster players that they lost last year. So it is interesting to see. And for my website, I do a coaches poll, and Crest, Ashbrook, and South Point all receive first place votes in that league. So the expectation of that being a highly competitive league, has been validated or confirmed again this year because everybody expects that. I mean, Crest has got a new coach, but he's not really a new coach. It's Mark Barnes, who'd been there before and had led him to a state championship. So it's not – I expect that to be a very seamless transition. Daniel Hoyle was a new coach at North Gaston, but he has a lot of coaching background from Rutherford County. Don't know how much that'll help him in Gaston County, but he's certainly aware of what exists over here and probably knows the daunting task he faces because he can be really good and not win a conference game, So, I think it's interesting to see how this league's going to shake out. And obviously, I mean, how many times can we ever say that a coach from South Carolina comes to North Carolina and finds it tougher trading than when he found in South Carolina? And Straight Heron has found that, even as he's certainly gotten Shelby's attention because they've won that rivalry game 3 in a row for the first time in forever. So, there's a lot of good storylines in the Big South, and expectations are extraordinarily high for 4 of them. The Crest, Ashbrook, Kings Mountain, and South Point crowd and fans all expect a state. It's almost state championship or bust when the year starts. But you can have a good year and go 3 or 4 rounds deep. I think Ashbrook felt really good about last year, even as they lost to Northern Guilford and they were disappointed in that defeat. But for a lot of historical reasons, Ashbrook kind of reemerged a year ago.
Yeah, I think some other people in the media might not be as high as high school T is on Ashbrook. We still had Ashbrook ranked pretty high in our preseason poll. I didn't see them ranked this high at other places. I think that might be a question on the offensive line. There might be some less size there this year. But to me, you got a quarterback like A.J. McLean and in a weapon like Savion Lindsay as seniors, you're in a good spot. And, I trust those guys to continue to perform this year. I still kind of have them as the slight favorite in this conference. It's tough. It's a tough one to pick. I still have Ashbrook there.
And a name to remember for them too. I remember last year in the middle schools, there was a kid that went to Holbrook Middle School that is at Ashbrook named Messiah Patterson. And he was so versatile that I believe I'm right in this. He won in his 2-year career like 6 different track events. So he's a versatile, extraordinary athlete, and it'll be curious to see what, if any, impact he has on Ashbrook immediately as a freshman, or if he just stays JV and they try to develop him because he's more of an athlete than a football player now, is the impression I'm getting from people. But, I mean, Ashbrook's adding athletes each and every year, and they expect to be good again.
That's fascinating. I always like to hear about those freshmen coming in. Well, speaking of freshmen, tell me about the Kings Mountain quarterback.
Yeah, he's supposed to be all everything, but, he's so good that the starter is transferred to Crest and may start over there from last year. And he was a 1,000-yard passer. Now, granted, Kings Mountain had, 2 Division I receivers, or at least one anyway, and Tex Vaughn that went to state. And I think the Hutchins kid is expected to go somewhere possibly this year. So I'm interested to see how that goes because I think it's real hard to teach even a talented quarterback how to protect the football because, much like baseball, I think you'll hear college and high school coaches say that a football game can be lost and won by turnovers, much like baseball games are often lost, not won. And it's hard to expect a freshman quarterback to hit the ground running as far as turnover control. So that'll be the thing that I'm going to watch for them. And boy, they hit it right off the bat playing Shelby first game. So that'll be an interesting watch for Kings Mountain this year.
It did sound like they did pretty well in scrimmage, and
Yes.
obviously it doesn't mean everything, but it did sound like they looked pretty good against Myers Park. This league is just it's so tough, Mr. Walker.
Right.
Do you have a favorite shot in the dark here?
Crest won the coaches poll that I had, but it was not a blowout. So, and like I said, Crest, South Point, and Ashbrook all received first place votes. Kings Mountain was considered fourth, which that says a lot about how tough this league is that they're fourth. So, and that's the preseason poll. So, I guess I'll agree with the coaches and go with Crest, but I know they do have some questions. But I think there's also a lot of expectation and that Mark Barnes will come back and just hit the ground running. I mean, he walked away from Crest a state champion, went down to Sumter and won some more and then came back. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes for him and their program because, they open the year with Shelby and Burns from the other league. They play Weddington. They play some challenging teams, Asheville. I mean, their non-conference schedule is difficult. And then they get in the league where they know that South Point, Ashbrook, Kings Mountain for three in particular really want a piece of them. Although Ashbrook did beat them last year, stopping them with a fourth and goal play last year at Ashbrook. So I guess I'll go with Crest, but that's because the coaches picked them.
For as much as we talk about the coaches that leave North Carolina for other states, it's interesting that this conference is bringing coaches back from South Carolina.
Yeah, right.
Mark Barnes. It's interesting how these types of programs are not having those kind of issues because these are the programs that's getting guys from other states. So it's fascinating.
Well, and the thing that I will say is Crest, Kings Mountain, and South Point particularly, there's in essence a K through 12 feeder program in place. I think Ashbrook's trying. It's just more difficult because they don't have it structured in the middle school level to where all kids of one school necessarily go to them. But I think Darius has done a terrific job because they used to. I mean, that was set up. Again, the whole history of the school, the name of the school is from Ashley Junior High and Holbrook High School when they formed. That's how Ashbrook became, and they don't get that necessary structure anymore. But they do get an awful lot of talented young kids that come into their program. And Holbrook's middle school, which is a primary feeder to them, has been really good the last couple of years.
That's interesting to hear. One note for our listeners, if you listen to our 828 podcast, I had mentioned that I thought that South Point might be picking up a game in week 11 against High Brighton. It turns out that's not happening. High Brighton chose to play Cummings instead of South Point.
Oh, okay.
So I believe that final week of the season is still open for South Point, which will be interesting because we expect South Point to have a first-round bye in all likelihood. So there's probably going to be a couple weeks there where they're not doing anything.
Yeah, that's kind of an unfortunate draw of the schedule for somebody. But, I mean, depending on what, like last year, I think they welcomed it because Blee had so many ankle injuries for them. But, yeah, I don't think any coach wants to have 2 weeks off at the end of the year.
They actually picked up Ambassador in that last week of the season.
Yeah, they did last year.
Yeah. Kind of had their way with them. So maybe there'll still be someone else they can find, but at this point, it's going to be kind of tough for that.
Yeah.
Gosh, what a fun conference. I can't wait to see how this top four shakes out. It could really go any way. I mean, honestly, if any one of the four of them, if you told me, in November, like this team won the conference, I wouldn't be shocked by any four of them. So I can't wait to see it.
Like I said, and we're talking about with the Charlotte schools, they don't have as many non-conference games, but those four teams are going to be challenged. And it'll be interesting to see how they come out of that momentum and health-wise.
Well, staying kind of in this area, so we have also the Southern Piedmont 2A, 3A, 4A. And this one, of course, is also a loaded conference between Shelby and Lincolnton and Burns. And last year, Richard, the emerging Stuart Kramer High School underneath Ashton Simmons, they came out of nowhere last year, finished 9-3, fourth in the conference. They had a big win, I believe, over Lincolnton, if that's correct.
Correct. The game that Mayfield set out.
Yeah, they came out of nowhere. And what's your read on this league? This is kind of a similar situation where there's probably a handful of teams here that could contend. But between Shelby, of course, the defending 3A state champion, in Lincolnton, who they met in the regional final again last year in 3A West. It seems like those two might have the clear shot at it.
Well, it's interesting. Shelby, started somewhat slowly for them, but I mean, look who they're playing. I mean, that's part of the deal. Here's the thing about Shelby, though. I've got all of Shelby's all-time records. Shelby's record against the other 8 teams in their league is 182, 46, and 8 all-time. Only 2 of them have beaten them in the modern era. Lincolnton and Burns. I mean, Bessemer City beat them once in 1936. Cherville's last win over was 1958. East Gaston last beat them in 1978. I mean, it's crazy how much Shelby has lorded over the teams that they play in their league. And then think about last year. Lincoln beats them, gets the number 1 conference bid, and they go to Lincoln and take them to the woodshed, 30-0. I mean, yeah. So and then it's one of those crazy games. If you hadn't watched the Shelby 84-41 game over Kinston, you'd say, okay, Shelby was on that day. Heck, they could have scored 100. I mean, the guy missed some passes.
Right.
And I was like and again, I'm a long-time coach supporter. I was in the press box at that from up top, sitting beside a couple of Shelby guys. I'm like, does Kinston not understand what you guys do? Because like the 2 guys in the seam are wide open every time down the middle of the field. And I'm thinking, Land Farmer just had to go, okay, him or I mean, each play, the guys are wide open. And it was running clock in the second half of a state championship game. Who has ever heard of such a thing?
Yeah.
But Shelby's got to redo their offense. Cruz Scott is a big question mark, although he got some time. Obviously, at Shelby, you get some playing time behind the starters because a lot of their games, like, for instance, the thing with Highland Tech, they are now 5-0 all time against Highland Tech, a combined score of 387-0. So you don't get much out of games like that, I don't think, other than just guys running around on the field, maybe getting some playing time. So, obviously Shelby's goal is to stay healthy out of the Kings Mountain Crest games, the first 2 games a year, be ready for Lincoln, which I believe is in early October, and then close out strong against Burns and be ready for the playoffs. So, yeah, but you're right. Kramer, to your point, has come out of nowhere, and it'll be interesting to see if they can take down another team. I believe they play Burns early. That would be an obvious huge win if they could pull that off. Burns has, speaking of freshmen, I believe the guy's name is, I can't remember his first name, but the Burns Middle School won the Tri-County Conference, which is Lincoln, Rutherford, and Cleveland County middle school teams, with a great quarterback prospect who many think will start this year as a freshman. So it'll be interesting to see how quickly he assimilates into that role, because last year Drew Dixon was a first-time starting quarterback, and he worked out really well. They also had Romello Wells, and they ran him in the Wildcat some and had a great deal of success, particularly in the game they lost against Shelby when they had just kind of a botched snap on a chip shot field goal that would have beaten Shelby and made Shelby, I think, a third-place team in that league going to the playoffs. Now, they may still got hot and won the state championship anyway, but Burns had them really on the ropes last year in the season-ending game. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out, but it's such a 2-tiered league because you've got Shelby, Lincoln. In my voting, Shelby wins by a point in coaches' voting over Lincoln. But, Shelby, Lincoln, and Burns are all, I mean, it's a runaway 1, 2, 3, and then Kramer's a little bit behind them for 4th, and then it's a real drop-off with the rest of the league. But
do you have any thoughts on the remaining part of the league? Because I think West Lincoln is probably a team that was like solidly in the middle last year. And you had Cherryville, East Gaston, the Highland Tech, and Bessemer City. Bessemer City does have a new coach this year. They got B.D. Waddell, who was at West Meck.
And he's an interesting case because he, having spent so much time at Huss before going to West Meck, has some semblance of an idea for what the school district would like. And historically, Bessemer City, through no fault of their own, and this is one of those weird nuances, and granted, it ended several years ago, but there's still vestiges of it. Before Cleveland County became a consolidated Cleveland County school system, there was Shelby City Schools, Kings Mountain City Schools, and Cleveland County Schools. Well, amazingly, the Kings Mountain City School District reached into Gaston County because Kings Mountain city limits reached into Gaston County. So there's always been kind of a back and forth, Bessemer City and Kings Mountain, over who's going to get those players. And Kings Mountain has historically come out on the better end of that, although Norris McCleary, who played at East Carolina and played in the NFL, I believe, grew up more in Kings Mountain, transferred to Bessemer City, and became a pro out of Bessemer City. So it has happened in reverse, but historically, Kings Mountain gets the better end of that deal. And Beatty probably knows that better than anybody from having spent time. He went to Forest View before he transferred to a high school in Charleston, South Carolina, and he spent a lot of time at Hunter High. So it'll be curious to see how quickly he's able to convince or recruit his own guys to stay in the Bessemer City district and go play for him. So I think Bessemer City, if I was to give a dark horse nod to a team in the lower ranks of that league, I would say that would be the one, because I think Beatty has at least a knowledge of what that looks like for Bessemer City's program. I don't think Bessemer City's middle school has been that strong the last couple of years, so it may not be necessarily this year, but they may be moving away at the middle school level for all I know, because typically, like I said, it's still crazy to think that Kings Mountain city limits and their school system carried into a whole nother county, which again is a whole set of issues when they consolidated the schools probably 20 years ago now. But it's interesting to see. And Bessemer City infrequently has talented guys. And
2 years ago, they won 8 games.
Yes, they had a couple of talented quarterback and talented skill players. They just didn't follow it up last year with a real good year. So, and the other team that's doing decent for 2A is Cherryville. They were 6-6 a year ago. Obviously, they're going to be overmatched when they play the Burns, the Lincolntons, the Shelbys. But if they stay healthy, beat the teams that they've got a chance to beat, they'll try to do something.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. So are we picking Lincolnton or Shelby? Yeah, make a shot in the dark here.
I'm gonna go with the coaches with Shelby, but it's a close race. And it's really going to come down. It's going to come down to that game at Lincolnton. They're back at Lincolnton in the regular season this year.
It's tough. I'll go with Lincolnton. Well,
I'm with you. Jalaithan and Mansfield are one of the best athletes around.
Oh, he's incredible.
And the thing with him this year is he may be a situation to where he rushes for about 150 yards and scores about 20 touchdowns because they just put him in goal line situations.
Right. Yeah. Just go finish drives.
He did some of that last year. Yeah.
Yeah.
So his stat numbers may look really strange to people, but based on what they do with him. I mean, granted, they've got the Lynches that are a good quarterback receiver combination, but I think Mayfield, particularly in contested games, and they play Sci Point earlier in the year, in addition to playing, and I believe they also play North Lincoln, which is a bigger school. So it'd be interesting to see how they do. They scrimmaged East Lincoln the other night, and apparently that was a really exciting scrimmage between those teams. I didn't hear exactly what the score was, but it's fascinating because that's the first time. Last year was the first time in years that those two didn't play. So,
well, before we go here, I do want to get your thoughts on East Lincoln and North Lincoln. They're in the other conference. They're in that conference with Hickory and Northern Conover, May, and all them. The Western Foothills 4A, 5A. Most of those teams is 8-2-8. But just give me your quick thoughts on East Lincoln, North Lincoln, and maybe West Iredell as well.
Well, East Lincoln has considered. I've talked to several guys that I've known for East Lincoln for years, and as you have lived through, East Lincoln has had the Surratt brothers and Cameron Dollar, who were terrific all-around multi-sport athletes, and they think Jackson's the best of the bunch, which is a statement, given how good Sage, Chaz Surratt, and Cameron Dollar were as football, basketball guys. So I'm curious to see how this plays out. It's only one player. Chaz, as a quarterback, made all the difference in the world for East Lincoln. They obviously have other guys to go with them. They've got a transfer that moved in from Mallard Creek to play quarterback. It'll be interesting to see how that chemistry works out for the talented receiving core that East Lincoln has. North Lincoln was a fourth coach in 4 years now, or third coach in 3 years. There's some transition there. But so it'll be interesting to see how they work out. Obviously, Hickory with Joe Glass, who coached at Lincoln before he went to Hickory, has a talented group again at Lincoln. So that league looks to be a little bit of a two-tiered league, kind of like the Southern Piedmont, in that you're going to have Hickory, Maiden, and East Lincoln locking horns at the top, and the other teams in the league kind of suffering whenever they play those three, but, competitive against the other ones. But, I think it's interesting to see how that plays out, because to hear that people just 10 years removed from the Surratt brothers and Cameron Dollar, the older brother of this Jackson Dollar, that he's better than all three of them is really remarkable. But I'm hearing it from people that have been around the game that know what they're talking about.
Wow. That's certainly saying something. If Jackson Dollar's best of all of them. All right. Well, I think that wraps us up here. Richard, thank you for joining us today to tell us about your kind of side of the 704, and really appreciate your time. And again, where can people find you at?
Again, CarolinaSportsHub.com. If you want to follow me on X, it's JRWalk22. And thank you so much.
And next up, we're going to talk to Matt Morrow about the rest of the 704. Thanks again to Richard Walker for telling us about all those kind of big schools in Mecklenburg County and Gaston County and Cleveland County. We have another expert here, Matt Morrow from Charlotte Football Insiders, here to take us through the rest of the 704 today. Matt, you do a great job just tracking all the different talented kids in Charlotte. Your organization puts on camps for these kids, so you have a good pulse and everything. Before we get into the kind of nitty gritty here, tell everyone about yourself, what you do, what Charlotte Football Insiders does, and where they can find you at.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity, Joel. So first off, Charlotte Football Inside. Is my connection not good?
I hear you. I hear you, but the video's a little delayed, but we hear you good.
Okay. All right. Well, Charlotte Football Insiders, we've been around since March of 2019, and what we do is we really promote high school football. We do it in a lot of ways. We do a weekly show, which has started, for the year on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. You can watch it live and comment, through those different mediums. We also go out and cover games on Friday nights. We do a Friday night show. We call it Friday Night Live. That is usually around 11:45 on Friday nights. I also work for Prep Reds on North Carolina, where we evaluate kids from all over the state. We do our camps and showcases, which you mentioned. Typically, we do one in May, and then we do one in December during the open recruiting period for D1 FCS, D2, D3, NAIA, JUCO, all those schools. College coaches will come out and evaluate kids in person and offer, kids on the spot a chance to go play college football on the next level. So we kind of do a lot of different things in a one-stop shop, way of promoting our local athletes. And then it's a passion thing because, if you do this, there's no, big money in it. And, that we don't do it for the money. We do it because we want to help our local kids, play college football and have a great experience, throughout high school.
I do recommend his weekly show that he mentioned there. If you just want pure football talk in Charlotte area, his show is a good place to get it. So they do a good job just kind of going through just the football stuff, going through all the games and the big moments and everything. So it's good stuff there. So since Richard kind of helped us with some of those, other conferences in Mecklenburg County, we are going to do some of the ones kind of on the periphery here. So I do want to start with the Southern Carolina 6A, 7A. Interesting conference, right? So we have Weddington here. Weddington's going to look a little bit different this year because they lost all those big name guys on defense. They still have a couple of guys who are going to be big name as well, namely Ace Clements, the corner. But interesting year, right? So Weddington's kind of in change. Charlotte Catholic brings back Mike Brodowicz to lead the program after a couple of years where they weren't quite at that, I think, Catholic standard that those fans expect, and they're hoping that Brodowicz kind of gets them back to that expectation. You got other programs that have differences. So Marvin Ridge and Cuthbertson have new coaches. Porter Ridge is, they still the same staff, but there are some player differences. Sun Valley had a ton of seniors last year, and Piedmont's still working on getting up into contention in this league. What's the big story in this conference to you, Matt, this year?
I think the big story is Charlotte Catholic with Mike Brodowicz coming back into that program. Even though Catholic was a third round playoff team last year, you could see, they were different, and I think bringing Brodowicz back, is going to kind of unite that community as a whole. And, a lot of his staff, is still there, and they know how to win, and they know how to win big. And, in my preview, I picked Weddington to win the league, but Charlotte Catholic is a team in 6A that nobody's talking about, and I think that's a huge mistake. They're going to come out there. They're going to be physical, dominate the line of scrimmage, and, they're going to be a problem.
The 6A thing, we've been talking about this in every episode of these previews. The 6A just across the state is as wide open as it's ever been this year. It's ripe for the taking for anyone. So Catholic could very well be one of the teams that seizes the opportunity there. It's gonna be fascinating to see 6A as a whole, and I'm sure you found that to be true. In the rest of the areas as well in terms of the 6A teams. It's kind of like it's not like there's this one team out there that everyone's penciling in. It's just a little bit different this year. So very fascinating to see Catholic. What do you think? What do you think of Weddington this year with those differences on defense? Obviously, you still expect their offense to be pretty good with Capone leading the way, and they get Jared Street from Independence. How much of a difference do you think this Weddington team will have from last year?
Oh, it's going to be a lot different. When you have that much defensive talent on one team, you can't help but see an adjustment in the next year. But I think they have some guys that are going to make a difference. Makai Enriquez and Eric Enriquez, they're brothers. They both, transferred into the program, and I think they're going to be huge impact players on the defensive side of football. You mentioned the corner Ace Clements, who's going to be really good. One of the things that, we talked about with Weddington is even throughout their high-level success, they never had a shutdown corner. And I think that's what Clements gives them. It gives them a little different look, on the defensive side of football. I think offensively, of course, Jared Street's going to, do a really good job. I think he's a really good fit into that, Weddington system. You're also going to see some different guys step up on offense because they lost a couple of really good receivers that were seniors as well. So it's going to be interesting to see who steps up and, kind of fill some big shoes there. But the good thing is, with Andy Capone, they're going to be ready to go. They really went out in the preseason and tested themselves a lot. I think I saw them in like 4 scrimmages, which, most teams will just do 2, but they were all over the place. And I think, he knows that they need that kind of building time and that experience against, quality teams. So, they're going to be there in the end. We've seen Weddington compete under Capone every year. And, like I said, I still think they're my favorite to win the conference, but it's not going to be a runaway situation this year.
And sometimes, when these programs like lose these top level players, they might be able to relish in the opportunity of just maybe not being the team that everybody's targeting right now. Like everyone still thinks they're good, but just the consensus is going to be, Weddington's not going to be as tough this year. So maybe that's a good point for Coach Capone to say, hey, nobody believes in you guys this year. It's different now. So maybe that's a good rallying point for him this year. It's definitely going to be fun to see how it works out. Ace Clements to me, Matt, is one of those classic guys where if you just got, an inch or 2 more height there, he is going to somewhere bigger than Marshall. Marshall's a great place, but with his skills in coverage, really impressive stuff. If he was one of those 6-foot corners, you would see him way up in those recruiting rankings. So don't discount Ace Clements there. Do you have any thoughts on Cuthbertson and Marvin Ridge and what with their changes this year?
Yeah, Marvin Ridge, their new head coach, David Johnson. I coached against him back in the day. He's a great offensive mind. I think it's a great hire for the quarterback they have, Levi Kerr, who's getting a lot of run. He's out of central casting when you look at him. He's a 6'5", about 200 pounds. He's got the arm, he's got the talent. I think you're going to see him break out in a big way this year. They've got a few, talented receivers for him to throw to. And that offense is going to be fun to watch. Cuthbertson, I believe Jeremy East is the interim head coach now. Mm-hmm. He's confident in his, guys that he's got there. There's got a couple young guys, to keep an eye on. The linebacker, I believe, is Coble and Kimbing. I hope I said that right. He's a really talented young linebacker, and Cuthbertson's become known for their defense, over the past few years. So it's a bit of a rebuild. They had Mason Iovino, who was, a big part of their offense at the running back spot last year. Replacing that production is going to be a big challenge. But they got some talented young kids. I really like their younger classes a lot.
Okay. Okay. How about with Sun Valley, Puerto Ridge, and Piedmont? What's the big thing you're looking at with those teams?
Sun Valley, Ryan Smith, a heck of a head coach, man. They made a great run last year. You mentioned all the seniors they lost. Um, they've got a couple guys that are going to step up. Joshua Bell at the running back spot. He's got some big shoes to fill. Obviously, with Zach Cullen, who was a big part of that program, graduating out. But I've seen that kid up close. He's going to be ready for the challenge. They've got a nice corner. I believe it's was Steer Williams on the defensive side, all conference player. He's going to be leading the charge on that side of the ball for them. Porter Ridge is interesting. They've got a interesting group of talented kids that been work. They work really hard. Keenan Sullivan moving over from the quarterback position full time to being a receiver. Him along with I believe it's Corbin Donahue at the quarterback spot. They're gonna make a nice tandem in the passing game. Who's going to step up in the running game is going to be an interesting thing because Porter Ridge likes to mix in that triple option look. They've gone more kind of pro style here. And I think that's more so because of the talent they had, especially with Rashawn Elmore last year, being a huge impact player. So it'll be interesting to see, what they, ultimately do on offense. But, they've got a couple of talented pieces to work with. And in Piedmont, once again, I think they've got several talented kids in the program. I just did some research on, I believe it was Deacon Presley, the talented offensive lineman they have that, the head coach is really excited about. Kedrick Bell is going to be an athlete, receiver DB type on both sides of the ball to watch. So they've got some pieces there to work with. With Piedmont, it's always, do they have enough, overall to compete for 4 quarters? They're in games, first half. And then, when you're on the field a lot, it just kind of wears you down. So if they can develop that depth, they can, start to become a factor there.
Awesome. Well, I think we're in agreement on this one. I'm taking Weddington, but I do think Catholic is probably the most interesting team, and I could see them having a heck of a year with everything kind of coming back to the way it kind of used to be. We're going to jump over to the North Piedmont 6A, 7A, another good conference in the area. So Mooresville won the conference last year. They finished 9-3 overall, 5-0 in the conference. Lake Norman finished 8-4 overall and 4-1 in the conference. Caden Kraft just committed to Tennessee, and he's still got another year after this coming. So congrats to him on that big commitment. Something about Tennessee and in our quarterbacks here, they seem to like our quarterbacks. So that's a good opportunity for him. And you can kind of project that, Matt, where, in the future, you can definitely see a point where Faison Brandon would be leaving Tennessee, where there'd be a natural spot for Caden Kraft to potentially elevate one year. So congrats to him. I do, mostly because of Caden Kraft, I do have Lake Norman as the favorite this year. I'm curious, do you agree with that, or do you have Mooresville?
No, I agree. It's Lake Norman's the favorite for me. Coach Oliphant has been there. I believe this is his 9th season, and he's done a great job in making this program consistently good. And this is the year that I think they can take a jump. They've been in the playoffs. They haven't done much in the playoffs, and I think this is the year that they want to make a run. And like you said, it's wide open for them to do that. Of course, Caden Kraft, is a nice piece to, elevate you offensively, but they've got a lot, a lot of skill guys that, can do some special things. Doc Caldwell at receiver, I'm really, really high on. I've seen him up close. He's starting to get a lot of, recruiting attention, and deservedly so. Noah Jacobson is another athlete guy. He's a talented kid as a receiver. Tylen Bellamy, another receiver, that's going to do some things for him. Offensive line wise, Sammy Wooten leading the charge up front. I believe he committed to App State. And then defensively, I really love, Memphis Barb, who is a edge, and he can play off-ball linebacker as well. Really productive kid. I believe Reed Joyce is their inside linebacker, tackling machine. He was an all-conference player. Mason Hefner committed to East Carolina.
Yep,
Kind of plays that hybrid outside linebacker, strong safety role. He's fearless. This team, has the pieces that you want, in a contender. They've just got to find a way to get over the hump in the playoffs. I think this is a team that if they get a win in the playoffs, you can see them make a Sun Valley type run this season. I think they've got that much talent. They've got the coaching. It's just got to all come together, and I think this is the year that it will.
Last year they did take a nice step by beating East Forsyth in the second round. That's a win over a marquee program. Of course, they went to Weddington in the third round and lost kind of lopsided there. I think this is a chance to be the best Lake Norman team under Coach Oliphant, just in terms of pure talent back and just kind of the feeling in that team, the feeling in that program. I think they have a real shot at being his best team. But give us your thoughts on Mooresville, because they're still a factor here as well.
Yeah, Mooresville lost a lot on defense. Tanner Finnerty at linebacker is going to be a major key. I really like his game. He's about the only experienced piece back on that side of football. So he's going to have a monster season and lead those guys if they're going to find a similar level of success this year. Offensively, they got some guys, that can fill in and, do some things. I really like the offensive line. They've got a couple big guys up there. Mason Holt, I believe he committed to Army, leads the charge there. And, I think offensively, they just have more coming back, that can make an impact, for them. And that's going to have to lead the way while the defense kind of gets up to speed. But I believe in the coaching staff. Coach Mayo and those guys, have done a good job. It was a tough way to lose last year at home in the playoffs to Reagan, a game I think a lot of people expected them to win. But this is the kind of season where, people don't expect much from you, and you can kind of, let loose a little bit, and, you might surprise some people. So the talent's still there. They just got to get them coached up, and we'll see how fast it comes together.
What do you make of the coaching switcheroo that kind of happened at South Iredell and Statesville? So Rydell Cowan went down to South Iredell, where he's from, and then Statesville hired Breon Holmes, who was from Statesville as well, and it was at Cox Mill previously. What do you make of those two teams and those hires?
Yeah, well, South Iredell, it's always cool to see, guys go back home, because I think it kind of gives them a jolt, and you go a little harder when you're at your alma mater. Coach Cowan going to South Iredell, I think is good. I think it gives the program a little bit of juice, in a different way. He's got his quarterback back. I believe it's Tristan Cowan. Threw 20 touchdowns last year. That's going to be a nice, feather in the cap for him as they try to kind of build that program up. I went and actually visited Statesville over the summer. And Coach Holmes is very excited about, being back home and being with those guys. Jerome Newman is a player to watch for them. He's a edge/receiver, 6'3", about 220 pounds, really explosive off the ball as an edge. I really like him there the most. I've heard Statesville's looked pretty good, in some preseason scrimmages. So I think that's a team to watch. Coach Holmes is going to get every ounce out of those guys. So, no matter what happens on a Friday night, those guys are going to play hard. They're going to play consistent, and it's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, I like that move for him as well because obviously in the situation at Cox Mill, where I mean, just frankly, the Cox Mill players just getting picked off left and right over the past few years. So it's nice to him just kind of be back, just in the community, not have to worry about that kind of stuff as much. So I'm happy for him to be there. In terms of the rest of this conference, so we have North Ireland. They hired Tony Pyland this offseason, so they're working on a rebuild there. Davie County, which is not 704, but it's kind of 704 adjacent with Coach Hinson there. I expect Davie County to be much improved this year now that he's got a full off season with them. So that'll be another contender for Lake Norman and Morrisville to deal with. So looking forward to the year here. It's a fun conference where there's some different things that could happen. I think we agree that Lake Norman's probably the favorite, but in terms of the rest of the order, it's going to be fascinating to see how it kind of winds up. We're going to jump over to the Greater Metro 6A, 7A. Olympic won this conference last year. They just edged out A.L. Brown for that conference championship last year. West Cabarrus made some strides and finished in third. You also have Hickory Ridge, Central Cabarrus, Cox Mill, Harding, and as well as Berry Academy. What's the story for you in this conference? It's another interesting league where it seems like a lot of different things could happen.
Yeah, I told people on our show that this conference is the hardest one to project because you just have so many unknowns. I went with A.L. Brown as my favorite to win the conference. And they had the returning quarterback and returning running back. So the offensive production was there. And then they, had a couple of key defensive players returning as well. So A.J. Settles at the quarterback spot, dual threat kid, had a high level of production last year. Lamar Gray at the running back spot, I believe he rushed for nearly 1,500 yards. He's back again. And then defensively, Dylan Hollis and Faison Manning, two of the leading tacklers, returning. They've got some good linemen in the program. I believe they picked up a couple of receivers, from a player movement standpoint. So, and then the stability in the coaching staff helps as well. This conference has had a lot of change, to your point, and that made them the favorite for me, but it is wide open.
It's I truly have no idea how it's going to go. You might as well put like a random generator here and then it'll give us an order. But what are some of your thoughts on Olympic this year coming off that conference championship?
Yeah, Coach Thompson has done a great job in being a steady leader and leading that program to success year in and year out. It's always tough to replace a 3-year starter that they had at the quarterback spot in Chance Cato. And that's something they've been working hard at this preseason. So I think they're going to try to lean a little bit more on the running game. And the one thing I love about Coach Thompson, his offense, they're going to find a way to run the ball. They got creative last year when they didn't have Cato, and they kind of had a wildcat system, and they put a couple of athletes in the role, and they found a way to move the ball until he was able to get back from injury. So I expect them to find a way to run the football. They've got a couple of, big offensive linemen they're going to lean on up front. Defensively, they got a few guys back in the program. Isaiah Ford is a all-conference, I think, defensive end. He can move inside and play tackle also. They've got a good secondary. I was told that they had all 4 of their main starters in the secondary returning, so I expect that to be a strength for them. And that includes the talented kid, White is his last. His first name's escaping me right now, and that bothers me. But he's a really, really big talent. I think he's going to flip over and play a little more offense this year at the receiver spot as well. So they're going to be, I think they'll be pretty good defensively. It's just going to see how fast the offense can come together under a new quarterback for him.
Kenny White's one of those guys where you pull him up on the film, and it's just like, I see it with this kid. He is so fluid, moves kind of differently, right? He knows where to be. So fun kid to watch there. In terms of the rest of these guys, Matt, I mean, we have West Cabarrus, Hickory Ridge, Central Cabarrus, Cox Mill, out of that Cabarrus part of the conference, then Harding and Barry and the Mecklenburg part of the conference. Who are some guys in the rest of these teams that people think need to know about?
Yeah, we'll start with Hickory Ridge because they really impressed me this past Friday night. I saw them at the Cabarrus County Jamboree going against J.M. Robinson, a team that a lot of people have favored as one of the top teams in 5A, and they played them to a 7-7 tie in 2 quarters.
Wow.
These guys have grown up in the offseason. They are big on the offensive line. They have a receiver, and hope I say his name right, Luke Unteriker, wears number 1. He's going to be dynamite. I mean, he's like 6'2". He's got athleticism. He's jumping out of the gym to catch the football. Good speed, runs good routes. That's going to be a name that you hear a lot on Friday nights. And then their defensive front is really, really good. I mean, they were good last year, but they're even better. They gave J.M. Robinson all kind of fits up front. They're a dark horse contender to win the conference, in my opinion. They just have the look of a team that's growing up. And, you know, we heard for the past couple of years that, you know, they had a middle school team that was really good. And now that I think that team is starting to come through now in the high school ranks. And, you know, they're going to be a program to watch over the next couple of years. Also, Central Cabarrus looked really good, you know, in their scrimmage against Concord. They're running the double wing system. You know, they had DeMonte James last year who had incredible production from the running back spot. And, you know, it's a system to where you can get multiple guys involved, and it's smart because, you know, you don't know who's going to be the guy, you know, depending on how the defense plays it on a Friday night. So Dylan Ryan at the quarterback spot did a good job of, you know, executing a lot of different handoffs and fakes. And when he threw it, you know, the ball was accurate. And, you know, that's a tough system to play in a scrimmage situation because, you know, you really need to, you know, scout your keys and all that stuff. Yeah. But they really impressed defensively. Infinite Morrow, number 44, defensive lineman was disrupting. No, I wish. He's that good. But he was really disruptive up front. He also plays some tight end, more of a blocking, you know, type of tight end, but he's got a couple of offers and, you know, leads the charge. I think their front 7 is really good. It's probably one of the best in the conference. I was really impressed with them. If they can stop the pass consistently, which in this league, you know, they may not have an issue because I don't see a team outside of Hickory Ridge and maybe West Cabarrus that can, you know, throw it enough to really hurt you. But they're strong. They're a strong team. And once again, you know, if they can stay healthy, you know, they could pose some problems for sure.
Fascinating. So it sounds like, you know, this is a conference in a lot of transition. We're expecting some of these teams to make some steps up this year, whereas some of the teams that, you know, we're at top might have some different players this year. I feel like if I had to pick, I'm kind of with you on A.L. Brown. It's hard to go against quarterback and running back who are that good. And it's interesting to hear that they've added some pieces as well. I think Coach Harden does a good job, and I think, you know, that committee's been waiting for a real breakout year, and maybe it could be this year. So we'll have to find out. Any players you want to shout out on Harding or Barry?
Oh yeah, Harding. Daniel Carter is a 6'4", 190-pound kid who can literally play all 3 levels defensively. I think ultimately in college he'll probably be in the secondary, but he's a dynamic player. He can also make some plays at the receiver spot. They picked up a quarterback. His name's Titan Smith, and you might have you might have seen some pictures on social media.
I have seen this young man. Yes,
he's a really big quarterback. I think he's 6'1", 270.
Cannot be fun to say.
I'll say this, you know, don't let the size fool you because the kid can really throw it. I mean, he can throw the heck out of the football. And it gives Harding a different dimension. Last year they were kind of a wishbone team that, they got a good running back in Jamarcus Harrison, but they give him that vertical element, and they got a couple guys that can make some plays down the field. Zillian McNeil at corner is a really, really good player as well. The thing with Harding, once again, is going to be the depth. They have, some top level talent that can compete, but can they do it for 4 quarters is going to be the key. Barry, they have a couple guys I like. Noah Brown is a talented defensive back. Briss Blackshear, a talented edge player. Nana Kwabena Mensah at the receiver spot is a talent. The big thing for them is going to be the quarterback spot. Can they get someone to get the ball, to a couple of these talented guys offensively? Defensively, they were able to hang in some games last year, but if you're on the field all game, you're going to get worn down, and that's what happened to them. If they can find a guy to run the offense and get the ball to playmakers, they can, be a bit more of a force. But that's been their problem, is offensive execution, and that quarterback spot is key.
Even name on West Cabarrus or Coxville people should know about?
Yeah, Cox Mills got a running back by the name of Juice Hall, who I think, in their new system, is kind of a version of a slot T. I don't know really how to describe it other than, it's going to be in the terms of run pass ratio, more of a Charlotte Catholic kind of look. A lot of misdirection with it. But I think he could have a big season in this system. Carter Castile at the quarterback spot, he'll be a steady performer there. He had a good season last year. I believe he was all conference. But the offensive change is going to, give him a different look. And I'll be interested to see how much they throw it out of that ultimately. But it was an interesting look in their scrimmage for sure. West Cabarrus, they have a couple of really good receivers. Jaden Reed had a nice scrimmage. I believe he had a touchdown catch. And they've got another receiver, number 11, and his name escapes me, but he was also an all-conference player last year. And they got a really good kicker, too. I think he's good from like 40 and in. So that's a great weapon in high school for sure. Coach Jenkins, coming over from Huff a few years ago, starting to settle in. I believe, they're going to have, they had a pretty decent year last year, but they're a sneaky team. They played 3 quarterbacks in the Jamboree, so I don't know who the starter is, but
okay.
They got a couple guys on the outside, like I mentioned. They're going to be steady in the run game. And defensively, they get after it. They've played good defense there consistently. Even when Henson was there, they were a good defensive team. So, defensively, they're going to get after it. And they've got some guys who can make some plays on the outside. So it'll be interesting. They're an interesting team.
Maybe they'll use 1 quarterback per down, like a first down quarterback. Guy. We'll see how it shakes out for them. That's a fascinating one. That GMAC conference is fascinating. I am going to take A.L. Brown at this point to win it. So we'll see how it goes. You mentioned this team in the last conference. J.M. Robinson won the South Piedmont 4A 5A, and I am one of those people that expects J.M. Robinson to be one of the top contenders in 5A. In fact, I might just pick him to win 5A when I do my picks column here in the next couple of days. Absolutely loaded. Also in this conference, we have Concord, Northwest Cabarrus, and West Irwan. They had a 3-way tie for second place last year. Carson's in this conference, East Irwan, Salisbury, and South Irwan. I do want to get into J.M. Robinson, but I'm curious about I'm most fascinated by Salisbury in this conference because we expect Salisbury to not be 2-9 like they were last year. Have you heard anything out of Salisbury? Do you think that was just kind of like a weird aberration? They'll be back? Like, what do you think is going to happen with them?
Yeah, Coach Trevette, I actually talked with them at the conference media day that we had. And he's more excited about this season. He said last season obviously wasn't their standards. They let some things go that they shouldn't have as a coaching staff. And he said this offseason they corrected those things. So they're looking up for sure. Isaiah Fox is going to be a major player for them at the quarterback spot. He's also going to play some defensive back. And they're going to have, some new kids step up. They were hurt by some injuries last year also. Of course, they're not going to use that as an excuse, but, that was a big part of, why they were, the way they were at 2-9 last year. I think they'll be better this year, but I think some other teams in this conference are also going to improve. So, it might be one of those situations where they're a better team, but the record might look similar.
Okay, that makes sense. I got distracted by Salisbury there, but let's go back to Robinson. So, again, just absolutely loaded in terms of returners. You look everywhere across the roster. It's quarterback, it's at running back, it's on the defensive line, it's at linebacker. They have guys seemingly everywhere. Obviously, the conversation starts with I think pronounce the name Ari Greenfield, the quarterback. He had a tremendous season last year. Threw for 2,500 yards, 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and also rushed for over 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns. With him back at quarterback, Matt, it's probably a good sign for this team.
Oh, yeah. Ari is a great young man. He's committed to Lafayette College. He had a big year last year, the dual threat kid, obviously, by the numbers you can tell. He makes really smart decisions with the football. He's really accurate throwing the football. And, Coach Seidel, really loves the kid. And, this year, I think this year it's going to be a test because, once again, there's going to have to be some different people that step up in two places, the receiver spot and the offensive line. The offensive line, they're young up front, and that's going to be the one thing that, to watch with Jam Robinson, how fast that young offensive line comes together and is able to protect up front and then give lanes in the running game as well.
Who are you thinking will get the majority of the carries this year? Because they have Ennis Styles back as a junior. I think he had their third most carries last year, but he's also obviously a very good linebacker, so they need him on both sides of the ball. What do you think is going to happen in the running game?
Oh, it's Ennis Styles. He's gonna be the guy back there. I think they've got enough defensively to let Ennis, be the full-time running back this year. Last year, of course, he shared time with Mr. Watson, who's now graduated and moved on to Pembroke. But in their jamboree against Hickory Ridge, he got the first carry and took it about 60 yards for a touchdown. So he's more than ready.
Did they not? They scored on the first play, but not after that?
That's accurate from what I was told. I saw the first half, and I told it was ended in a 7-7 tie. So
okay, interesting. Okay, so with the offense line is gonna be young. We established that. Do you think that is there anyone in that group that while they might be young, you could see by week 1 to the end of the season, like this kid's gonna have probably some really big growth? Is there someone there you like?
They're an unknown group. I know there's a couple kids that I've got down kind of on a watch list. But I don't really want to shout them out right now because that
we gotta see him do it.
Tends to put some undue pressure on them.
Yeah.
But they've got some size. It's just a matter of once again how quick it comes together and getting reps. That's going to be the big thing for them.
You mentioned how they have some guys on defense. Tell us about those key players over there. I think there's one guy on the defensive line or edge spot that most people know, Landon Harding.
Right. They also have Jameer Ayers, is an edge guy. Duke Dow, another edge guy I'm really high on. He's got a couple early offers. And of course, the linebacker Isaiah Woodburn, one of the best players in the state. And I don't think a lot of people know about him because he's not a big, boaster, of his talent, but he's really, really good. Those guys are going to lead the charge, on the defensive side of football.
Yeah, it's gonna be. I think it's gonna be a heck of a team, and we'll see how those young guys come into form here. But I mean, we were talking about how 6A is wide open. 5A is also kind of a little bit open this year. Obviously, Crest won the state championship last year. We talked earlier with Richard about how there's a new quarterback and whatnot there, a new coach there, a new old coach there. So there are some curiosities with Crest. We'll see what happens with Robinson. Maybe they have a good shot at it. I did want to get your thoughts on the rest of this conference, though, because it's another one where it's a high parity conference between Concord and Northwest Cabarrus and West Rowan. Carson's making progress. What's your read on the rest of the league?
Yeah, we can start with Northwest Cabarrus. Hudson Irwin at the quarterback spot, I think, is going to have a big opportunity to kind of throw it around this year, and he's got some guys he can get the ball to. Shane Lucas Walker is a very talented tight end. He can block, he can catch, he can run good routes. Caleb Bryant on the outside is a dynamic player who can high point the football, 6'3", good speed to get down the field. West Rowan, you got to talk about the defensive lineman Caden Weeks. I believe he's the defensive player of the year in the conference last year. Disruptive. He really prides himself in stopping the run. He said that in the media day. And with young defensive line, you usually hear about sacks. And when I heard that, I said, this kid gets it. This kid absolutely gets it. Because that's where it starts and stops right there. They also have their running back, Devon White, returning. I believe he rushed for over 1,300 yards in like 8 games last year. So he's going to be a heck of a talent to watch with that team. Concord is in a bit of a rebuild. They were a good team last year, made the second round. But they lost a good bit of kids. Their big offensive lineman, Carter Earl, is the guy to watch. He's worth the price of admission if you like big offensive linemen just moving people against their will. But they got some young guys, on both sides of the ball that they're trying to get them to grow up fast. So, it's going to be a little bit tough when you're going through that. Carson, Roshawn Perkins at running back. It's going to be his show. He was kind of in a dual situation last year, but now he's the guy. He could have a big year. They run, I believe, a version of triple option a lot. So they're going to be running it and running it. He could have a big year, easily over 1,000 yards. Let's see who else is in there.
Carson, man.
Yeah, East Rowan. This is a team that I think is a sleeper. A lot of people have them projected pretty low, and they took a step last year in winning 4 games, and they were very confident at the media day that they're going to take another step as a program this year, and they've got a lot returning. They're going to be a team to watch. Jason Bonds is a receiver that made some big plays for them on the outside to give them balance. I think they've got a good running game. So they're going to be interesting just because I think they're going to sneak up on some teams and surprise them. South Rowan, they're going to be a tough physical team. I mean, they're big up front on the offensive line. And they want to run the football. They want to be old school, smash mouth. I mean, I formation, power I, come downhill. I mean, they embrace it. I mean, I met with those guys, and they're just ready to hit somebody else. But I like that. I like that as a former O-line coach. It gets me fired up. Owen Smith is the kind of the old school, fullback / middle linebacker. And he leads the charge for them. They got a good running back that was all conference last year, and Nicholas Wolf. And they're going to be if you like old school football, go to South Rowan.
Owen Smith, 100 solo tackles last year. That's pretty hard to do. 100 solo. That's pretty impressive. So yeah,
Oh
we'll see how
yeah.
things go for them. And it's a fun conference. They have lots of teams, good teams ahead of them that they're competing with. So we'll see how they progress this year. Another 4A 5A conference, Mr. Pep, is the Rocky River 4A 5A. Obviously, this has Monroe in it. Forest Hills, interesting team this year without Jamie Deese, who went to Charlotte Christian. Also, Mount Pleasant's in this conference, Anson, Parkwood, and West Stanley. Interesting league because you have a mixture of teams that have competed at a very high level, but lately it's been kind of a Monroe show, I would say. Do you think Monroe is in the driver's seat in this conference, or is there someone else?
Oh, it's Monroe's conference. I was so impressed with them when I saw them at the Cleveland County Jamboree going against Crest. I mean, these guys, they forced Crest to go 3 and out, and then they scored on the first play from the scrimmage. They were ready to play. Jameer Jackson is probably the best running back that most people haven't heard of. He's got a couple offers, rushed for over, I believe, 1,200 yards last year. And then they got Kylan Polk coming into the program from Forest Hills. So they're using both of those guys in the backfield at the same time. And that's a dynamic looking backfield. I mean, it's interesting on how they're deploying that. And I think as the year goes on, that's going to give teams a lot of problems. And, if teams are going to put 8 in the box, they've got 2 big receivers on the outside. Micah Allen is the name of one of them. And he made an incredible catch down the field, against Crest. And his athletic ability is through the roof. So they've got the elements of a Monroe team that can make a run on offense. And then defensively, my goodness, they've got a couple of edge guys that are just really, that long, lean type of edge, but they're strong enough to set it in the run game and get after the passer in the passing game. So they're going to bring pressure. They've got good DBs on the outside. They gave Crest a lot of problems. That's why, they never could get in sync offensively. They won that scrimmage 10-7, but it was a battle. And I think Monroe is back to being one of those year in and year out contenders. They look good.
So yeah, that kind of leads me to my next question here. So now you see them against Crest. Do you think they're solidly in this 5A West race here? We mentioned Robinson. Hickory's always going to be there. Obviously, Crest the defending state champion. East Lincoln's going to be a problem. Do you think Monroe has as good of a chance as those teams?
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Yes. The thing with Monroe, there was 2 things. One, and I keep saying this, but I mean, it's just the way it is. One is depth. And then 2 is going to be, can they throw it when they need to throw it? With those 2 running backs, they're going to be able to run it against just about anybody. They'll find a way to do that. But can they get the ball down the field when they need to do that? And that's going to be the major key for them.
All right. Who are you kind of leaning towards for second place in this conference? Mount Pleasant and Forest Hills have been the closest, right? But Forest Hills, like I said, with the coaching change, and I think Mount Pleasant had some key seniors in that team. Where are you at with those 2 teams?
I went with Forest Hills in the preseason projection. Coach Giddings, their new head coach, is a good coach. He's been around for a while. He knows offensive football, very well. They've got a good quarterback in Noah Furr, who's been in the program. Kai Finazzi up front on the offensive line gives them a big guy to kind of build, their running game around and their protection schemes. They've still got some athletes, that can make some plays offensively. They seem to keep that over there. It's kind of a different version of Monroe where you always find someone to make some plays. And then defensively, the linebacker Baker is going to lead that team along with Finazzi at the defensive tackle spot. But Baker's a tackling machine. He's going to be all over the field. So I think they've got enough, to be a second place team here in this conference. Mount Pleasant, it's a machine. They're gonna run the ball, in kind of the same mode of a Charlotte Catholic. It looks a little different schematically, but that's what they want to do. Of course, they got a couple big offensive linemen to lead the charge. I think the best one's Cooper Mullis, 6'2", 295, road grader type. Of course, that's great for their system. But Coach Crosby and those guys, they're going to be well coached. They're going to play hard. Of course, defensively, the biggest thing with them is how they play the pass. And they went against West Cabarrus in the Cabarrus County Jamboree. West Cabarrus hurt them on the pass. So if they can, find a way to get to the quarterback, because I think that's the best way to alleviate, downfield passing, that'll help them out a lot. But they're going to be in the mix just because, of the system they run. It always makes them tough. And they're going to have, tough physical kids, and that, playing in Mount Pleasant is not easy. So
right.
They got a couple things, working in their favor there.
And to wrap it up here, what do you think of Anson, Parkwood, and West Stanley this year?
Parkwood's the best of those three. Coach Mobley has been building that program up slowly but surely, and he's got a bunch of talented kids. Anwar Bitt is an athlete. I believe he committed to Catawba recently. He's a good receiver, and it'll help out in the defensive backfield. Tyler Searles will make a difference on the defensive line. A good-sized kid, 6'4", plays the edge spot. He can slide down in sub packages and play D tackle as well and get after the quarterback. And they got a couple other guys there as well that are going to be impact players, all conference players, in my opinion. And it'll be interesting. I think if things fall right, they can challenge for second. I mean, I think they're that, far in their development to where, they can become a problem. But they're definitely the best of those three. West Stanley and Anson are still building, and I hate to see what's happened to Anson County. I mean, it's no fault of their program. It's just that area down there. I mean, they have lost so many, jobs and people moving away, and I mean, it's just hard. It's just hard to compete when you don't have the base around you.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. They're one of the teams that people talk about. It wasn't that long ago, but they used to be one of these teams that was just kind of considered a power. Just like the people used to have that game on the schedule, be like, oh, we gotta bring it that week. So it's unfortunate to hear what's happened to them. And you're right, it is out of their control. It's just pure kind of economic stuff that's kind of changed that program. So I think we'll agree on this one. We're going to go with Monroe here, and it will be interesting to see how they compete. Potentially get back to a state championship like they were a couple of years ago when they won it. So we'll see how they do in the rest of the 5A West. Another conference that I think you went to this media day, so the Catawba Shores, 2A, 3A, 4A. It's essentially a conference full of charter schools, but these programs are all doing a good job, and they've made steady progress. There's a little bit difference here with Community School Davidson having a new coach. Of course, Corbin Community won the conference last year. I suspect you might have them as a favorite again.
Corvian is my favorite. I saw them go against Shelby in the Cleveland County Jamboree, and they held their own. Really good defensive line, led by Nate Kamba. Of course, Josiah Fields will be a part of that as well. And they've also got a young freshman by the name of Colin Jeffries, who's going to be big time. I mean, this kid is 6'4", 200 pounds already. And, believe me when I say this, the Hollyfield kid at tackle at Shelby is one of the best offensive linemen in the state, and he gave him problems. So, this kid is legit, man. So Corvian is going to be, led by that defensive line up front. They got the young quarterback and Tyson, I believe it's Douglas Brown. Really, really good looking kid. Cam Simpson, number one at receiver, is a dynamic player, man. They found different ways to get him the ball offensively. He's going to be a major problem on Friday nights. Um, but that program, I really admire what the coaching staff has done in building that program up. And they're not scared to play people. Like in the non-conference, they're playing Independence and Chambers in CMS, and that's only going to do wonders for when they get into conference play because they've seen those kind of bigger teams, and they'll be ready for the challenge. So I like that team.
Yeah, and yeah, it might be for whatever team that gets out of 2A West this year, they're going to have a better opportunity against Tarboro this year than they might have last year. Tarboro is a team that only has 3 starters back from last year's state championship team, so there might be potential if it is Corwin that gets through. I have the potential to have a better shot being Tarboro than they might have last year. So we'll see what happens with them in the playoffs. I do want to hear your thoughts on the rest of the teams in this conference because there's a lot of good coaches in this conference. And all these teams seem to be making steady progress. What's your read on the rest of the field here? Is there a team you like?
Yeah. Of course, I've got to mention Community School Davidson and my buddy Kenneth McClamrock. I actually call him my brother. We have done a lot of CFI stuff together over the years. But he inherited a good team from TJ Albert. Ty Siegler still in the fold at the quarterback spot. Big Matthew Worley, offensive lineman, committed to Davidson. And they've got a couple other players that I believe are going to be impact guys defensively that are going to make a big difference for them. So, I had him preseason as my number 2 pick in the league. But I'll tell you, a team to watch is Christ the King, man. I tell you, when I saw him at the media day, they had a quiet confidence about him. And, I don't know if it was just because the group was all seniors and they've been around and, they feel confident in what they're doing. But Coach Charlie Jackson, he's got those guys locked in, and they're going to be a problem. They're not going to be an easy out for sure. Lake Norman Charter is another team to watch. They got a returning quarterback and Dylan Wignut. I hope I said that name right. And they always find a way to be in games. They're a team that they're not going to get blown off the map. They're well coached. Matt Monchoy's done a good job. I believe it's his 4th year at that program. Of course, I have to shout out, Adam Weber leading Bradford Prep in their first varsity season. I think they're going to be a little better than what people, think, from a first-year varsity program. We got Lincoln Charter in there as well. They had a really good quarterback last year, and he transferred out to South Point, South Carolina. I think if they had him back, they would be a factor. I mean, he was that good. But they've got a young quarterback, a 2029 kid, who can come in and, kind of keep them, at that level. They won 3 games last year. And, I think they've got a chance to do something similar again. Langtree, still building. They got a quarterback, Easton Roschke, I believe is his name. Good looking kid, man. Had some decent numbers last year. Interested to see how he continues to develop this year. Yeah, I hit everybody there.
I think Pine Lake Prep is also.
Oh gosh, Coach Schroeder's.
They have the best. They have the best looking field in this conference. That's for sure.
Yeah, Coach Schroeder's excited. He's excited. They've got a quarterback into that program, Chase Sarver. Big strong arm kid, man. Coach Schroeder's excited because he wants to run the ball and then have a vertical passing game off of it. Okay. And he feels like he can get back to doing that this year. We got a couple good linemen. Paul Mahoney offensively is going to lead the charge up front. TJ Kiefer, the linebacker spot, all-conference player. We had over 100 tackles last year. So they're going to be an interesting team too.
All right. Well, good stuff here. I think we're in agreement on the core being the favorite here, but it's gonna be a fun league. I think Christ the King's a team that I think might make some noise. Some people, some outside this conference might start recognizing what they're doing over there. So it's gonna be a fun year. One more conference before we go here. So we're kind of disagreeing on what this conference is called. I think it was called the football only 2A 3A, but on Max Preps they have it as Yadkin Valley 2A 3A. Not sure what the conference is called, but it does have North Stanley, North Orwand, South Stanley, Mountain Island Charter with another one of your co-hosts there, Morrow, Union Academy, Thomas Jefferson Academy, and Bonnie Cone. North Stanley won this conference last year. Actually, there was a tie here for first place between North Stanley, North Orwand, and South Stanley. It looks like. So fun league, competitive. What do you make of the teams in this one?
Yeah, I went with North Stanley as my favorite to win the conference. They've got a few guys back that, are going to be impact players. RJ Brooks at the running back spot is a really, really talented kid. He's got a couple early offers. Jaden Little, defensive player. I believe he's one of the top guys in the state with sacks last season. And they got a couple other kids that I saw up close, a couple showcases that look pretty good. Stability in the coaching staff, has been strong with them as well. So that's kind of why I went with them as the favorite. I think a key for them is going to be the quarterback spot. I know they were trying to, kind of figure that out. But they've got enough around that position to where, they just need someone to kind of manage, the game and get the ball out to the key guys and just not turn it over really. North Orwand, I had second in the conference. They've got the quarterback returning. It seems like North Orwand keeps a quarterback because they're going to find a way to throw it around offensively and produce. And they've got a good quarterback back. They've got a good receiver back. I believe it's Dion Norman Jackson at the receiver spot. And they've got a safety returning that's going to be a key player for them defensively. I chose Mountain Island as third. They got a kid, Andre Jackson is going to be there. They call him 3K. That's his nickname. He's going to be a major key for them offensively. He played quarterback last year. They're going to try to move him around a bit this year. More of a receiver. He may play a little bit of running back, depending on, what they decide scheme-wise. Caden Clark's going to be another important player for them on the offensive side of football. South Stanley lost a lot. I mean, they had a ton of seniors last year. So I think they're going to be in a bit of a rebuilding mode.
Unfortunate. Last year was their opportunity. I think then they had some injury problems at the end there, so they didn't really fully see their opportunity there. So unfortunate for them this year.
Yeah. Morrow, I believe, is in this league as well. And they've got some skilled guys returning on both sides of the ball. All conference middle linebacker, running back. I believe it's Shadi Pergi. Is going to be an impact player for them. Union Academy, I believe, is in this league as well. They got a dynamic quarterback receiver combination. I think it's going to, cause some problems for teams on Friday nights. And I think that's, is it Thomas Jefferson in here too?
Yeah, Thomas Jefferson and Bonnie Cone, they were also in this conference.
Yeah, Thomas Jefferson ended up making a run, I believe, in 1A, right?
Yeah, they ended up going decently far. And, well, I'm trying to remember. I'm still learning all new classes, man. They were in 1A. So technically, this is a 1A, 2A, 3A conference. Backstraps just says 2A, 3A. Yeah, so they were in 1A. They went to the third round and lost to South Davidson in the third round. So they had a pretty good run there. You're right.
Yeah, I know their quarterback is going to be their main player. He's kind of a dual threat kid. And then Bonnie Cone's in a building situation. They're excited about their middle school program, and they're trying to kind of, build off of that. And then once those kids feed into the high school, then I think we're going to start seeing some progress with that program. Um, but it's an interesting mix of teams, and they've probably got the longest rides for conference games that I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's some long trips, and it's unfortunate because that affects the gates at all these schools. So it's unfortunate the way it shook out in that regard. It's some good competition, some equal competition, but in terms of just the survivability of the school, not so easy when you're asking people to travel an hour and a half or 2 hours to go to a football game. It's not the best setup for in terms of that. There's one other guy on North Stanley I wanted to mention, Rasir Bruton. He was just a sophomore last year, and it's kind of underrated because he did this in the special teams area. But he had almost 1,000 total return yards last year and 5 return touchdowns last year. So he was one of the guys who identified as I think he was an honorable mention All-State special teams for us last year because of what he did in the return game. So if he is back at North Stanley this year, that's another guy you have to watch out for. I probably wouldn't kick it to him after what he did last year, but I hope he gets his opportunities still. Any other notes on this league before we go?
It's gonna be a competitive league all the way. Between, like you said, they tied for first place last year between North Stanley and North Rowan. And I think you're gonna see one of those other teams jump up and challenge. And it could be Albemarle, it could be Union Academy. I think they've both got interesting returning guys that have been productive, and if you take them lightly on a Friday night, they could surprise. So it's an interesting league from that perspective.
Yeah, it certainly is. I'm also going to go with North Stanley as my favorite here, just based on what they have back from last year. Well, I think that about covers the rest of the 704. And I think we got between you and Richard Walker, I think we covered about everybody. So thank you for coming on here. You do such a great job of just kind of elaborating on these teams, explaining what's back, who they have, what the storylines are. And if for anyone that just watched this, and you can watch Matt every week do this analysis on his show on CFI. Look up Matt Morrow on YouTube. You can find his show every week. Well, man, in addition to that, where else can people find you?
Yeah, Twitter is at Pepman704 or at CFI Showcases for the camp stuff. Facebook, Charlotte Football Insiders. YouTube is Matt Morrow, as you said. Instagram is also Charlotte Football Insiders. So, feel free to check us out, follow us, and we'd love to have your support.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you for doing this with me every year here and helping us out. And looking forward to we'll probably bump into you at some point this year. And until then, you just enjoy your time and welcome back to football season.
Absolutely. I appreciate it, Joel. Thank you so much.